Hello, Hunters. I finally got enough fragments to actually take a good look at Strand builds for you. And, you have a build. You got something there, but let's chat for a little bit. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor, Mobalytics.gg. Mobalytics makes guides for Riot games like League of Legends. My wife and I use their team fight tactics guides all the time. Valorant, and now they're moving to Destiny 2. They've put together these great build guides for Destiny, like this one that you're about to watch, along with some others that I'll be producing, along with a bunch of other top meta D2 builds. They'll be in written form over on their website, which you can find linked in the description. Make sure to check it out, and you can find my builds there. Hunters, you too have a high uptime suspend build, much like the other classes. Let's talk about your currently available aspects. The first one, Widow's Silk, is basically the Armamentarium. Yeah, the Titan exotic. You get an extra grenade charge, and your grapples create a grapple point for other people to latch onto for free instead of costing them their own grenade charge. So, while that's neat and everything, and getting a second grenade charge on its own is pretty strong, this aspect ultimately doesn't really help us too much when it comes to build crafting, at least with the tools that we have available as of this video. It certainly boosts whatever build we're going to come up with, but at the moment, it's hard to build around get an extra grenade charge in a meaningful hunter-y way. The second is where we get a little more something, and Snaring Slam gives you a dive bomb attack which uses your dodge cooldown, and you suspend anything within a small radius of your landing spot. So that's what we're going to be focusing on as an introduction to Strand Hunter. This is Strand 101 for Hunter. Okay, so dive bomb uses our dodge. So let's dig through any exotic that says it does something with a dodge, and none of them work. Dragon Shadow, Gemini Jester, these do not work when you activate your dive bomb. Dive bomb is not technically a dodge. It uses the cooldown of your dodge, but it is not classified as a dodge when it comes to these exotics. Therefore, it doesn't work. I do wonder if Bungie will ever change this so that dive bomb does work with these things, just to give people some more options, but I also understand being apprehensive about giving people the ability to proc these exotics on what is already a very strong effect. So what does actually work? Well, for starters, 6 Coyote works because it doesn't do anything to your dodge or affect it in any way. It simply gives you another charge. But hey, it works. We just doubled up on our suspend potential. That is pretty nice. Radiant Dance Machines also work, but there is a technicality. You need to use a regular dodge near enemies in order to activate the exotic part, which is after you dodge near an enemy, you get unlimited dodges for 5 seconds. And if we're spamming this as fast as possible, we'll be able to get 3 dive bombs out of this effect. But having to dodge near enemies first means we have to put ourselves in some unnecessary danger just to start the dive bomb process. Is this really that big of a deal in the average piece of content? Of course not. But do I think you'll probably have a very similar experience using 6 Coyote, at least until you learn how all of this works? Yeah, I do. What else do we have? The Bombardiers. Dodging makes a little bomb, and when on Strand, the explosion will sever targets. Doesn't work with dive bomb, so it's kind of a moot point, but also our melee severs targets, and I'd much rather just throw that at an enemy from a safe distance. Assassin's Cowl has gained a lot of popularity recently, and the exotic effect does proc on grapple melee, making it a somewhat viable option. Finally, we have the new exotic, Sir Tarachne's Facade. Bet you didn't think I'd get that one right. Which gives us Woven Mail when activating our grapple and gives us increased flinch resistance while we have Woven Mail. While this doesn't really tie in with our build that much, it does at least synergize with Widow's Silk, and the Fragments we'll likely be using since grapple melee is very potent, so we'll be looking to use that effect as often as possible. However, given how easy it is to spawn Orbs of Power, we can get Woven Mail via a Fragment by picking up said orbs, so I'm not the most keen on the exotic at the moment. For this build, I'm going to be starting with 6 Coyote, just so we can establish a foundation, and from there you can tweak the build with different exotics if you so choose. Fragments. We're going to be taking several pages, really the whole book, from Titan. Thread of Mind is pretty important here for what are hopefully obvious reasons. Class energy from killing suspended targets. That's kind of our whole thing. Continuity also makes a lot of sense here, extending the duration of strand debuffs. We're going to have a lot of that going out, so boosting it just makes a lot of sense, especially if in later seasons you take any fragments that give your strand weapons unraveling rounds. I can understand rotating this fragment out though, as most enemies in low and mid-tier content will not survive long enough to even see the normal duration suspend, much less an extended version. Generation is going to be great for our grapples and grapple melees, but it's also just very good in general. Getting grenade energy for free, it's pretty nice. And then I picked up warding for that free woven mail on orb pickup, but this is also where we can get some flexibility. You could even flex out generation, but I think people just really like it because it's a really good effect pretty much everywhere in the game. Orbs with this build are quite easy. We have siphon mods, we have firepower and or heavy-handed because grapple melee will trigger both of these at the same time, making 2 orbs. I don't know if that's a bug or not, but even if it is a bug, making orbs will still be easy as grapple melee is quite potent when it comes to damage. I think woven mail is simply too strong to pass up on, especially given that this build is all about dive bombing into groups of enemies in order to suspend them. You're going to be putting yourself in potentially dangerous positions, and having the ability to just shrug off all the damage thrown at you is quite a benefit. Are there any other flex options in this build in particular? Well, Thread of Fury is not too bad in Season 20 since Tangles do a lot of bonus stuff, and our melee is okay. Thread of Wisdom also makes a good amount of sense. Precision kills on suspended enemies make an orb, and as we'll talk about, you're going to be doing this quite a lot. We have some of the weapon fragments like Propagation, powered melee kills give you unraveling rounds, Transmutation, weapon final blows make a tangle when you have woven mail, Rebirth, strand weapon final blows might make a threadling. These are all fine if you want to rotate them into your setup in some way, but I personally value woven mail a lot here because with all the grapple melees and the dodging near enemies, you're going to be in the thick of it quite a good amount of the time, so I want to stay alive. Also, my machine gun is just absolutely destroying everything anyway. Seasonal perks, pretty much the same as the other classes. We're taking Strand and Void perks. I don't think you really need to go multi-siphon. That's kind of a personal choice. I'm thinking Void and Grenade perks personally, and then yeah, just grab all the good stuff. Untangler, Threaded Blast, Volatile Flow, Bricked Up. I've been liking Shatter Orbs for the seasonal activity too. Tons of orbs. Stats-wise, Hunters unfortunately have to dig for a little bit of mobility over the other classes at the least, so I think mid to high mobility, mid to high resilience, mid to high recovery, and high discipline is a good setup. We don't need to go too crazy on resilience because of woven mail, but just be aware that for the times where you don't have woven mail, you're going to be left a little bit vulnerable. Mods. Mods. Well, class ability energy is kind of the name of the game here. In my hunt for what mods I thought I should use, I ran some activities without any mods whatsoever besides stats, no seasonal strand perks either, nothing. This was to see what I thought some weaknesses of the build were and where mods could patch up some of those holes. This is something I encourage all of you to do while build crafting as well. It's going to help you figure out where your weaknesses are, as some people might have a weakness in one spot, but to others, it doesn't bother them as much. My first weakness is the fact that diving into a group of enemies is indeed dangerous, even in seasonal content. There are a few rooms where there are just tons of enemies, and suspending the ones near you will not be enough. And I found that I was not creating or picking up orbs for myself for woven mail before going into a group of enemies, and if I found myself being irresponsible in seasonal content, then in anything harder, it's going to be much worse. So I started making note of that, and now I'm dying much less often. One of the first runs that I did, I found myself saying, oh, this is why people like the new Hunter Helm, because it automatically gives you woven mail when you grapple. The times that I did remember to grapple melee into stuff to spawn orbs, I also noticed the orbs weren't really being collected instantaneously. I had to better monitor my movement after a grapple melee so that I could position myself to actually get the orbs as fast as possible, which most of the time meant not immediately running away. When it came to my ability energy, in seasonal content I felt pretty fine. but you're also randomly grabbing favors, which boost your energy and all that, so it was a bit inconclusive. I hopped into some legend campaign action, and I'll remind you, that is minus 15 levels, and as long as I was suspending and then killing decent groups of enemies, I'd say 3 to 4 enemies, then I would consider it a good suspend. I got most of my energy back from killing the suspended targets, and rarely felt like I was starved for energy unless I used my dive bomb poorly or I just completely missed. But if I ended up supporting that weakness with mods that gave me more class ability energy when I used a melee or a grenade or I picked up an orb, then that one bad suspend wasn't going to completely ruin me. In fact, the more adept you are at suspending multiple enemies at once, the less I think you need 6th Coyote and can opt for the new helm, which means you could also swap off of Threat of Warding for something else if you so choose. All of this is to say that I really think your mod loadout comes down to personal preference, as the build on its own, no mods, no nothing, is very self-sustaining. I'll tell you what I ended up going with, and you can tweak it from there. Helm, I went with a stat mod and a siphon. The siphon you pick depends on your guns. I went with dual strand void siphon since I'm using a lot of those guns right now. If I'm in a helping mood, I'm taking powerful friends and ashes to assets. If I'm not, I'm going power ammo finder. Gloves, the whole double orb thing, firepower and heavy-handed, is cool, but considering that we're mainly using orbs for woven mail, I don't think we really need to. Before you ask, no, focusing strike will not trigger multiple times with your strand melee, it's just the one time, but it was still a healthy chunk of dodge energy with 2 of them stacked in case you find yourself needing the juice. But why go with that when we can go with bolstering detonation, because we have 2 grenade charges. Chest, we're going resistances unless you want to go for some sort of armor charge play with charged up. Legs? Yeah, legs. Look. The simple play is a stat mod with 2 surges. You throw in some time dilation in the cloak, bada boom, you're done. And honestly, I think it's a very easy and smart play, especially in Season 20. Machine guns are wrecking face right now, void ones even more so. You have 3 great ones in Commemoration, Corrective Measure, and Retrofit. Let's just lay into the strength of it because of the gameplay loop of this build, you know? If you have space like I do, I think for now I'm going to go with Recuperation, but if I think my health needs are okay, I'll go to Insulation to take the edge off of any missed dive bombs, or Absolution if I have the space. Class item, because we're going with surges, I want Time Dilation. But now, a word on utility Kickstart, or many words rather. Kickstart mods are a little weird with abilities that have multiple charges, like 6th Coyote. For example, I was about to start making this video saying that utility Kickstart wasn't working with dive bomb, with the theory being, oh, it's a dive bomb, it's probably classified as something else, that's why it's not working with the exotics, that's why it doesn't work. And then my Discord community hit me with the, well, actually, and turns out it does work with the utility Kickstart, because if I use both of my dive bombs immediately, one after the other, utility Kickstart works. But that's really annoying to do in moment-to-moment gameplay, and I wouldn't tell someone or recommend someone to do that. If you have basically any amount of energy while using 6th Coyote, utility Kickstart won't work because it says you need to be completely empty of energy. This is an issue that I had with Titan Melee when making that video. An ability with only 1 charge will always leave you with no energy when you use it, so Kickstart doesn't have any issues there. That being said, as I discussed, I wasn't really experiencing issues with class ability energy regardless. Remember, all that discussion that we just had was with no mods and no season perks. So if you are running something that isn't 6th Coyote, then I can recommend utility Kickstart a bit more because you're not going to have to think about its use. It's just going to work. Not only that, but you'll have room in your legs for the Absolution mod, multiple copies, and considering the possible orb generation capabilities that you're going to have, especially in Season 20, I think Absolution will treat you very well in activities that have a lot of orb spawn potential. But for now, with the 6th Coyote setup we got going on, I'm just going to keep it simple, just doing double time dilation while we're running with Surge mods. Let's get familiar with the build first, and then we can evolve it down the road. So, the gameplay loop. What is the gameplay loop? Well, it's find stuff to dive bomb it, kill everything that is currently suspended, and then move on to the next group while peppering in your grenades and your melee as you're able to. You're scooping orbs as much as possible to give yourself Woven Mail and Void Surge for your machine gun, which is already doing absurd amounts of damage anyway. It's what I think is actually a pretty good introduction into Strand in general, because you're using a very simple exotic in the 6 Coyote, and you're not doing any sort of crazy ability spam like the Titan might be capable of with Heart of Inmost Light. It plays more like the Suspend build that Titans have, except instead of a wall, you're just dive bombing into stuff. This is probably why it didn't take me super long to get myself familiar with the build. Conceptually, it's very similar to Titan. Now, when it comes to the tangles and all that, in Season 20 anyway, your best bet is to just make them go boom, given all of the perks that they have. Is 6 Coyote absolutely necessary for this? I think we have established no, but I think it depends on your skill level or expertise with the build. I think for beginners or people still getting familiar, 6 Coyote is just easier, but as you learn, you can then rotate to other exotics and mods, or maybe something else comes along in a future season, and then we rotate over to that new thing. What about master content? Well, grapple is going to be a bit more tense to use, not as safe, so swapping over to shackle grenade is not a terrible idea at all. Think about it. 2 dive bombs, 2 shackle grenades. Watch me just torment these master difficulty champions. They're chain suspended for basically as long as I want them to be suspended. I might not be killing them very quickly, but when I have this much control available, it almost doesn't matter how long it takes to kill something. I haven't really mentioned PvP in these videos at all, but a PvP-ified version of this build has also been performing quite well. You would just swap to some more PvP-oriented mods and targeting, unflinching mods, etc., etc. I don't have too much else to say on the experience as it stands right now. You dive bomb, you shoot the suspended enemies, you scoop some orbs, and then you find your next batch of victims. Rinse, repeat. It's more fun than I thought it was going to be, but making sure you have survivability in higher tiers of content is something you're going to have to practice a little bit. Just getting into the rhythm of getting orbs, making sure you have Woven Mail before you go do something else. Definitely interested in Hunter the most in terms of future aspects. I really want to see if Bungie is going to continue to lean into the grapple thing for them, or if something else is in the works. For now, I'll be moving to explore Stasis and Solar next, which I'm pretty excited about. Feel free to discuss your favorite variants of this build in the comments. Again, these videos have been for building familiarity with Strand, establishing a baseline so that you can then go experiment on your own. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.